So, everybody, welcome. My name is Smutko. I'm an astronomer here at Northwestern. I'm also on the staff of the Observatory downtown, and I'm in the operations of this lovely observatory that you're at now. This is the Dearborn Observatory, which is actually located in one of the oldest buildings on campus. This particular building dates back to 1888. And actually, this is not the original location of this building. This building used to be where Tech is now. And when they built Tech, for whatever reason, they decided it'd be cheaper to just pick the building up and move it here than to start all over again. I don't know, they saved 20 bucks that way or something like that. But anyway, we're very proud to have this telescope here. The telescope behind me, the main telescope, the long white one, was the world's biggest refracting telescope for 6 years. Those years happen to be 1862 to 1888, but nonetheless, the record still stands. It's 23 feet long, it has a 23-foot long focal length, it has 18.5-inch diameter lens made by Alvin Clark and Sons. Now, if you're not familiar with the name Alvin Clark is the lens making. It was very similar to what Stradivarius is, the violin making. They're highly prized even today, excellent quality optical instruments. Alvin Clark's not making any more of them, so we're very happy to have them. The tube, the white tube, is not the original tube. This was replaced in 1911. The original tube is actually a wood and brass, very elegant thing, but it doesn't do so well in the weather that we have here in Chicago. And the original tube is actually on display at the Adler Planetarium, so you can go see the original tube down in Adler. But we still have the lenses. This is the original lenses, so we kept the most important part, and we gave Adler the empty cardboard tube. It looks impressive, but we have the important thing. Now, today we're not going to be using the main telescope because it's kind of overkill for looking at the sun. The main telescope gathers about 5,000 times more light than your eye does, so the sun's already pretty bright. So we rarely use it for solar observing, although we do have a 20-inch filter we put on front of it if we want to. Instead, we're using two telescopes, two smaller telescopes. We're using a brass Kleiner telescope, and this is almost original equipment as well. Way back. On the front of it, I have a special white light filter to make it safe to look at the sun. Don't try this at home, never stare at the sun, etc., 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 unless you know that you have the proper filters, and we do have the proper filters here. So in the brass one, if the clouds and the haze cooperate, you'll be able to see a white light image of the sun. And you'll see a disk of the sun in yellow whitish light. And you'll also see crosshairs. The crosshairs are in the telescope. They're not part of the sun. That's just that people ask, why are there lines going across the sun? They're to help us line up the telescope and make sure we're pointing it right now. But right about here, where my thumb is moving, is a sunspot. And if the weather cooperates, you'll be able to see the sunspot right about the position of my thumb. That sunspot is bigger than the Earth, easily bigger than the Earth. The sun is so large, even though it looks very tiny in the telescope. I had a bunch of third graders here yesterday, so I gave them this whole speech yesterday. Even though it looks so small in the telescope, the sun is enormous. The sun is so large that if it were a hollow sphere, you could put 1,000,000 Earths inside it. So this one tiny little freckle-looking thing on the surface of the sun is many times bigger than the Earth. It just looks so small because it's 93 million miles away. Now the gold and black telescope that we have is what's called a hydrogen alpha telescope. And that one is tuned to just look at one particular wavelength of hydrogen, 6563 if you're an aficionado of the hydrogen spectrum. And it lets you, it basically eliminates 99.999% of all the light from the sun, except for this one wavelength of hydrogen. And this is an interesting wavelength because it's associated with a lot of the activity on the surface of the sun. Things like the coronal prominences and the spicules and the prairie fire phenomena that you can see on the surface of the sun are all detectable with this telescope. They're still there in white light, but they're swamped by the rest of the light from the sun. This telescope throws away all the rest of the light and just lets you look at that interesting hydrogen. So even on days when there aren't any sunspots or other activities on the sun in white light, we can usually still see a lot with the H-alpha telescope. Unless, of course, the weather is cloudy. People ask me all the time, can we do any real astronomy from here, outside of Chicago or in Chicago downtown at the Adler? And the answer to that is absolutely yes. with digital camera technology and also with filter technology. We have filters that can filter out a majority of the street lights and light pollution. So we're not so limited by the fact that 7 million people live around the observatory, but rather the weather in Chicago stinks 2 out of 3 nights. So that's our biggest limitation. Anybody have any questions? I'll do my best to make up something that sounds good. Yes, ma'am.
What happened?
And where are you from?
Thank you very much. But there's a piece of the Dearborn's history that there's a span of time that I don't know about.
Okay. We have brochures on the way out.
Just to give you a little bit more information, the lens was ground in 1861 for the University of Mississippi, but because of the Civil War, they weren't able to pay for it. It went up for auction.
Well, it was also made in Boston, so the idea of shipping something from Boston to Mississippi in 1861 is a little out of the question.
Yeah. What's that?
Yes, we have a plaque with some of the story, and there's also we have a white handout. That's a couple of you guys with all the dates. But anyway.
And was it Harvard? They bid on it, and was it Harvard that bid on it and won it, or I can't remember the university that did it, but what was the University of Chicago at that time swooped in on the auction day, and they got the lens.
We have cash and pay you now.
Exactly. Instead of, we'll pay you Tuesday for a hamburger. But you can't say that with anybody these days because nobody understands it. Nobody gets it. But anyway, the tube was replaced, like we said, in 1911. I didn't know that date. But the adder opened in 1930. What happened to the tube, the wooden tube in that span?
The Chicago Astronomical Society, I believe, had it in the meantime, and it was kept in Hyde Park or thereabouts for the intervening time.
Okay.
And then it's in our brochure.
That's cool.
And I don't need to be here. Michelle has as well.
No.
What sort of retrofitting have you done in order to
pretty much the wood floors, I think, are original, and the walls are original, and everything else is so this pier, actually, I think that this pier is also original. If you open any of these doors, you'll notice that it collects dust right now. But this used to be full of gears and clockwork mechanisms. In 1880-ish, we didn't have electronically controlled servo motors to drive the telescope. We wound up the telescope. It was gears and clockwork, just like a grandfather clock, and that filled the middle of all this, and it drove the telescope to not only just to move it, because the thing, as you can imagine, weighs a fair amount, but also to keep it in sync with the Earth's rotation, so that you don't have to continually adjust the point of the telescope. And that used to be inside. Now it's a conversation piece. Why is it empty again? Now we have, the whole thing is controlled by 2 electric motors. You can see one right there, a silver thing, and there's another one on the other side to drive the other axis. Synchronized through with these lovely cables that run under the floor into a room, another room in the building where we have the main control electronics there. And it's all done electronically. And very similar to anybody that has a Celestron or a Bean or anything like that, where you can sit at your laptop and type in what you want to look at. We do the same thing. We have pictures basically just showing the stones. There's nothing up here. There's concrete pillars. And then it was metal for a long time.
Did you read this? Are you getting it?
Yeah. You got to hit it just right. I don't know if you ever did a biology class with a microscope.
Right, 2 weeks or 2 weeks.